Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, so welcome to episode 11 of the It Is Taught podcast. We're in the 29th of Kislev of a leap year. It's the 5th day of Hanukkah, so happy Hanukkah once again. And interestingly, this episode is going to be really short. So this is a really short day in terms of the portion of the Tanya. And in some years, it's actually longer. So there are some years when Kislev, the month of Kislev only has 29 days. And there are some years when the month of Kislev has 30 days. So on those years where the month of Kislev has only 29 days, we actually learn both the portion of the 29th as well as the 30th day of the month on that day. But in this year, we have the month of Kislev has 30 days, which means that we have 2 days to study these two portions. So today we're going to be learning the 29th of Kislev portion, and tomorrow we're going to be learning the 30th portion, God willing. So, so today's portion. So today is, like I mentioned, it's really brief, but it actually does cover a pretty important topic that we briefly mentioned in one of the previous episodes, which is about the clothing of the soul. So we briefly mentioned, if you remember, it was back in chapter 2. So you can look that up and study it there if you haven't done so already, where we briefly mentioned the garments of the soul, where we talked about, that different souls have different levels and there's different aspects of the soul. But in addition to all these different levels, the soul actually wears different garments when it comes down into this world. And specifically here, we're still in the subject of the godly soul. So if you remember, we talked about how every Jew has two souls, the animal soul and the godly soul. And we're still in the focus of looking at the godly soul. So in today's portion, we talk about how this godly soul wears certain garments in order to manifest itself here in the world. And these three soul garments are what are known as thought, speech, and action. In Hebrew, we'll know them in Hebrew as machshava, that means thought. Then there's dibur, which is speech, and maaseh, or maaseh, which is action. And what this means is that, the whole purpose of the soul coming here down into the world is to fulfill the Torah, for a Jewish soul. It's to fulfill the will of God through the different mitzvahs that God gave us in the Torah. But the soul is a very spiritual entity. It has nothing to do with physicality. So, and the Torah involves a lot of physical things. So, we put on tefillin, men put on tefillin, women light Shabbos candles, we daven, we learn Torah. All of these things require some physical aspect to perform them. And so how does the soul perform these physical acts if the soul is not at all physical? There's nothing about the soul that is physical at all. It wears these garments. So it wears these three garments of thought, speech, and action in order to perform the will of God as manifest in the Torah. So to break it down a little bit further, for example, when a person performs one of the mitzvahs, when a person does the action of a mitzvah, such as a man puts on tefillin, a woman lights Shabbos candles, somebody gives physical tzedakah to another person, physical charity, things like that. So in that moment, when they're doing a very physical kind of action with their body to perform the will of God, what garment is the soul wearing? You can probably guess. It's wearing the garment of action. It's wearing the garment of maaseh, depending on your accent. And then, now what about if the soul is involved in studying Torah and is involved in learning about the meaning of all of the different laws and things that you need to do. So we know that there's an idea. If you've ever gone into a study hall, into a yeshiva, and you see people learning, you'll notice that it's not quiet at all. It's very loud, and everybody is talking and reading out loud. So the process of learning Torah in Judaism is meant to be one that's very outspoken, that's supposed to be done out loud. So when we do this, we are using which soul garment would you imagine that we might use? You might have guessed it already. We're using the garment of speech. We're using the garment of dibur, speech. And then the third garment that we have, the garment of thought. So when does the soul employ that? The soul employs the garment of thought when we think about the Torah, when we really meditate and contemplate upon the Torah and the mitzvahs and everything that God wants us to do. This is when our soul employs and vests itself in the garment of thought. And thus we see that every single part of a person's body, if we really break down a person's body, we can break it down into these three aspects in terms of the way a person manifests themselves. There's the action, the speech, and the thought of a person. Each one of these things, each one of these behaviors, whether it's action, speech, or thought, can be thought of as the garments with which the godly soul vests itself in order to do God's will down here in this world. So it's short and sweet today, but it is a really essential thing because this is going to come up a lot in the Tanya, this concept of the garment of the soul. So keep it in mind, and we will continue on this theme tomorrow. I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.